Today, I want to share a little bit about my journey to becoming a mom and some of the things that I've learned in my 40 years as a mom. So this question is for everybody. How many of you come from a large family? So what's the highest number? Well, I know you guys, there's 7 in your family. Anybody higher than 7? Any more kids? 8. Kathy came from a family of 8. Okay. So I was born into a fairly large Catholic family. I am number 5 of 7. And in the small town that I grew up on the High Line, Dodson, there was only one other family that had more kids than ours. If you come from a smaller family, you might wonder if in large families, sometimes you get lost in the crowd, or you're just another face at the dinner table. I didn't have to worry about that.
Because
last year on this day, I was in Malta with all of my siblings, and we were celebrating my mom's 80th birthday. And I had this idea in my head that this would be a fun thing to do. So we all went to Mom's party dressed in our regular clothes, and then toward the end of the party, one by one, we kind of singled in with these shirts on. And the first one caught my mom's eye, and she smiled. Then the rest of us came until all 7 of us were there wearing these t-shirts. And it was a special day. Today is my mom's birthday and Mother's Day. And I don't get to be with her, but happy birthday, Mom. So, in truth, my mom never played favorites. I'm sure there were days that she could say that one or more of us was her least favorite, but she'd never single one of us out as her favorite. My mom came from a small family. She had 1 brother and 1 sister. She became a Catholic in order to marry my dad. And this woman, who had been raised in a small family in a relatively quiet home, gave birth to a crowd. When you do the math, 7 times 9 months per child, she was pregnant for 63 months. If you break that down into years, that means that for 5 1/4 years of my mom's life, she was pregnant. That is a commitment. I have great memories of my mom from when I was a little girl, but I couldn't fully appreciate my mom until I was a grown-up. To raise 7 kids took a great deal of planning and a lot of creativity. In the early years of my mom's marriage, there wasn't even running water in her house. She had to haul water in and heat it on the wood-cooked stove. And I can't calculate how many cloth diapers she changed and then washed by hand. How many tears she dried, noses she wiped, owies she bandaged, how many kisses she gave, how many hours of sleep she lost over the years, how many times she played the role of Tooth Fairy, Easter Bunny, and Santa Claus. How many prayers she must have prayed over us until we were grown, and I know she still prays now. I love her for it, and I thank God for giving me to her. The circumstances and experiences and the people that come into our lives are what shape our character and help us to become who God planned for us to be. My dad came from a large family, 8. And on that side of the family, I had 4 uncles and 3 aunts. And 2 of my aunts were nuns, Aunt Jean and Aunt Luella. They became nuns when nuns wore the full habit. A nun's attire easily identified them and left no doubt of their denomination or their calling. So except for the white hood that encircled their faces and trimmed the edge of their headscarves, they were clothed in black from head to toe. The only part of their bodies you could see were their faces, hands, and the tips of their shoes. My aunts, especially my Aunt Jean, they were quiet women. They spoke softly, and they seemed to float rather than to walk. You couldn't see their legs, and it just seemed like they floated wherever they went. And they made a huge impression on me, and it seemed to me that they walked very close to God. And at that very young age, I was convinced that I wanted to be a nun. Until I got to be old enough to go to catechism, and I met Sister Jeanette. Sister Jeanette's habit was less conservative than what my aunts had to wear. However, she wore a stiffly starched black dress that came to just above her ankles with sturdy black shoes. Her black jacket was starched as well as the black headpiece with the white trim around the face. Sister Jeanette had a voice like James Earl Jones. She was 5 feet tall and 5 feet wide. She looked like a Sherman tank in a penguin suit. And she terrified me. I spent most of the catechism class in the restroom hiding. I went home that day with no recollection of the lesson and absolutely sure that I did not want to be a nun. Change of plans. A few years later, Sister Jeanette moved on, and Sister Joanne became our catechism teacher. Ours was the first parish she served, and we were her first catechism class. She was young and pretty. She played the guitar and had a beautiful singing voice. She had a gentle spirit, and she always spoke kindly. By this time, the nun's habit was even less severe. Sister Joanne wore a black skirt that hit mid-knee, a black sweater set with a simple cross necklace, and a black headpiece with a white trim that didn't hide her face or neck, and even some of her hair was allowed to show. She bore no resemblance to any military equipment. She was lovely and gentle like my aunts. And even with all these wonderful attributes, my original dream of being a nun was not revived. It was over. Sister Joanne taught us many Bible lessons, and one in particular stayed with me always, and it came from the book of Exodus. It was the story of the birth of Moses. This is the short version of the story. The Israelites, God's people, the descendants of Jacob, living in Egypt, were multiplying rapidly. The new Pharaoh of Egypt was a mean man who hated the Israelites and made them his slaves. He hated them so much that he set out to have all the male babies killed so that the number of Israelites in Egypt would get smaller. To protect her new baby son, one mother placed him in a basket and set him afloat in the river near the place that Pharaoh's daughter and her maids came to bathe. That baby was Moses. Moses had an older sister who watched from a distance to see what would happen to her baby brother. When Pharaoh's daughter and her maids arrived at the bath site, they found Moses there in his basket. He was crying, and Pharaoh's daughter, knowing full well that he was a Hebrew child, took pity on him and decided to adopt him. Because she had not given birth to Moses, she did not have the ability to nurse him. So Moses' sister stepped forward and asked Pharaoh's daughter if she should go and bring back a nurse from the Hebrew women that could nurse the baby for her. Pharaoh's daughter sent her to do just that, and she arrived back on the scene shortly with her mother. Moses was allowed to stay with his own mother until he no longer needed to be nursed, and then he went to live in Pharaoh's palace. For me, there were a lot of things that could be taken from this Bible lesson. And the first one, I was struck by the mother's love and the daring and dangerous plan that she came up with to save her son's life. She trusted her God for a favorable outcome for her son, and he was given right back to her. Later, she had to trust her God again as she gave him over to Pharaoh's daughter for good. Secondly, I was impressed by the sister and the role she played saving her baby brother. She had to be very brave to step up and speak to Pharaoh's daughter, a Hebrew child addressing a princess. In my family, my brother is the oldest, the only boy in the family, and he was kind of a stinker. And there were many, many times I wished my mom would put him in a basket and send him somewhere. But she never did. After we got to be grown-ups, I started to like him a whole lot better. But another thing that struck me was that there were two moms, two very different kinds of moms. The birth mother and the adoptive mother. One who loved him enough to give him up, and one who loved him enough to take him in. That is a Mother's Day story for the record books. And that is exactly where you'll find it in the recorded history of God's people in the pages of the Old Testament. The last and probably the most important thing that I took from the lesson was that I began to have an understanding of the sovereignty of our God. In a situation that seemed hopeless, God made a way. Not only to save one of his own by placing him safely right under the nose of his sworn enemy, where he was accepted as Pharaoh's grandson, Egyptian nobility, and then using him from that vantage point to change the course of history for all of God's people. God had chosen Moses to be the leader of the Israelites, and it all happened according to God's plan and in God's time. Sister Joanne had a craft project for us that day that went along with the lesson. We were each given half of a walnut shell, a square of Kleenex, and we each got to cut a picture of a baby from a magazine. We each assembled a version of Moses in his basket as a reminder of the lesson. It was my favorite Bible craft ever. I kept it safe by putting it in my dad's desk drawer, because none of my siblings would touch my dad's desk. And over the years, I took it out, and I spent a lot of time looking at it and remembering the Bible lesson. And I decided then, and I knew that I wanted to be a mom when I grew up. And I started to pray that God would let me become one. When I was 8 years old, and my younger sister was 6, our baby sister came into the family. Jan was a later in life baby, and we all got to help take care of her. I fell in love with her the minute I saw her, and I couldn't wait every day to get home from school to see her. Her arrival was a blessing, and caring for her made me positive that I wanted to be a mom. When career day came at school, the teacher asked each student in my class what they wanted to be when they grew up. Some of the kids didn't have any idea what they wanted to be. Some of the girls said teachers or nurses, and the boys said cops or firemen. My answer was easy, and I shared that I wanted to be a mom. And my teacher's response was, "That's not a career." When I went home that day, I was pretty heartsick, and I told my mom what the teacher had said, and my mom wisely told me, "Just pick something to appease your teacher and don't let it ruin your dream." In time, God did allow me to be a mom. Labor with my first child started on Sunday night at 9 p.m., and my son was born Monday night at 9:54 p.m. I barely got a glimpse of him before the nurses whisked him away to the nursery. It had been a long, slow process. My mom, dad, and my 2 younger sisters had been patiently waiting at home for the call. And they came right away to see him through the nursery window and to congratulate Roger and I. Later, when they were gone, and my husband had gone home to get some much-needed sleep, they brought my son to me. He was wrapped up tight in a neat bundle with a tiny blue knitted cap on his head, and all I could see was his face. The second the nurse exited the room, I slowly unwrapped that tiny bundle to see that from the top of his sweet head all the way down to his tiny toes, he was perfectly formed. He was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. A precious, long-awaited gift. The prayer I prayed as a little girl had been answered, and a dream had been fulfilled. When my daughters were born, I unwrapped them in the same way and marveled again that they too were perfectly formed. That's the clincher. You fall in love with them on the spot, and you commit to loving them forever. My teacher was wrong, so wrong. Being a mom is a career. We are moms through every stage of our children's lives. When you become a mom, you never stop being a mom. Even if our children are called home before us, we are still their moms. And if God calls us first, we're still their moms. Robert Munch wrote a book. It's called Love You Forever. It's about a mother's love for her son and that son's love in return. It's a short book, and I'd just like to read it to you, if you don't mind. A mother held her new baby and very slowly rocked him back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And while she held him, she sang, "I'll love you forever, I'll like you for always. As long as I'm living, my baby you'll be." The baby grew. He grew and he grew and he grew. He grew until he was 2 years old, and he ran all over the house. He pulled all the books off the shelves. He pulled all the food out of the refrigerator. And he took his mother's watch and flushed it down the toilet. Sometimes his mother would say, "This kid is driving me crazy." But at night, when that 2-year-old was quiet, she opened the door to his room, crawled across the floor, looked up over the side of the bed, and if he was really asleep, she picked him up and rocked him back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And while she rocked, she sang, "I'll love you forever, I'll like you for always. As long as I'm living, my baby you'll be." The little boy grew. He grew and he grew and he grew. He grew until he was 9 years old. I have a 9-year-old grandson. And he never wanted to come in for dinner. He never wanted to take a bath. And when Grandma visited, he always said bad words. Sometimes his mother wanted to sell him to the zoo. But at night, when he was asleep, the mother quietly opened the door to his room, crawled across the floor, and looked up over the side of the bed. If he was really asleep, she picked up that 9-year-old boy and rocked him back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And while she rocked him, she sang, "I'll love you forever, I'll like you for always. As long as I'm living, my baby you'll be." The boy grew. He grew and he grew and he grew. He grew until he was a teenager. He had strange friends and he wore strange clothes and he listened to strange music. Sometimes the mother felt like she was in the zoo. But at night, when that teenager was asleep, the mother opened the door to his room, crawled across the floor, and looked up over the side of the bed. If he was really asleep, she picked up that great big boy and rocked him back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. While she rocked him, she sang, "I'll love you forever, I'll like you for always. As long as I'm living, my baby you'll be." That teenager grew. He grew and he grew and he grew and he grew. He grew until he was a grown-up man. He left home and got a house across town. But sometimes on dark nights, the mother got into her car and drove across town. If all the lights in her son's house were out, she opened his bedroom window, crawled across the floor, and looked up over the side of his bed. If that great big man was really asleep, she picked him up and rocked him back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And while she rocked him, she sang, "I'll love you forever, I'll like you for always. As long as I'm living, my baby you'll be." Well, that mother got older. She got older and older and older. One day she called up her son and said, "You better come see me because I'm very old and sick." So her son came to see her. When he came in the door, she tried to sing the song. She sang, "I'll love you forever, I'll like you for always." But she couldn't finish. She was just too old and too sick. The son went to his mother. He picked her up, and he rocked her back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And he sang this song, "I'll love you forever, I'll like you for always. As long as I'm living, my mommy you be." When the son came home that night, he stood for a long time at the top of the stairs. Then he went into the room where his very new baby daughter was sleeping. He picked her up in his arms and very slowly rocked her back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And while he rocked her, he sang, "I'll love you forever. I'll like you for always. As long as I'm living, my baby you'll be." That's why I brought the Kleenex up here. I want to close my message today with the top 5 things that I've learned after 40 years as a mom and 16 years as a grandma. First of all, know that being a mom is a privilege. Not every woman who desires to be a mom gets to be one. Second, children are an inheritance of the Lord. Remember that they are precious gifts and handle them with care. Third, accept that you're not perfect, but know that our God is. Don't try to raise a child without asking for his guidance and direction. Fourth, love your children thoroughly with the same kind of love that God extends to us. Fifth and last, love them forever, in and through every circumstance. Love them forever and pray for them always. Amen.